Very happy good morning to everyone. If you would please open your Old Testaments to the book of Ecclesiastes. We will continue our study on the Lord's Day morning in the Old Testament wisdom and poetry. So Ecclesiastes is where we will be studying this morning. And this series of studies introducing the book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then we'll, Lord willing, present the book of Psalms next week, is in preface, in introduction to the series on studies in poetry and wisdom, in particular the Psalms, which will begin in August. We're enjoying right now studies in Titus. Our brother Brian is teaching those classes on Sunday morning through July, and then beginning in August, Lord willing, we'll start studies in the Psalms, and there are 4 different men that will be involved in those studies. One of the saddest, most melancholy songs I've ever heard was written many years ago. It was entitled, "Is That All There Is?" And the song is about a person who goes through the various phases and endeavors of her life. And after each phase and endeavor, she always asks the same question. She says, "Is that all there is?" And then she says, "Well, if that's all there is, then let's just keep dancing." As if such constant distractions of fun and game can somehow fill the void of a purposeless life and the emptiness that she and so many others have felt at the end of the day, if indeed that's all there is. Well, it's just to such a person as that, and she is a reflection of countless millions of people who's wondering, isn't there any more to life than going through the various motions of education and choosing a career and collecting a paycheck and going through this phase and that endeavor, as countless generations have before us? It's just to such a person, this Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes was written. And because of its theme and its primary purpose, it is, brethren, an excellent book to use in personal evangelism. It is one of the best. And you and I have used this many times in that way, introducing a person to the Bible and where they came from, why they're here, and where they're going. Well, the writer of Ecclesiastes goes into great detail, describing the same inevitable conclusion that any person will reach if they pursue life under the sun with this perspective of looking to the various things of this life, whatever it may be: money, recreation, fun, and games. It could be power, a career, knowledge, as an end to itself. Well, Solomon, who I believe is the writer of this great Old Testament book, wants to save you a lot of time and a lot of stress and misery, because he's already been through it. And what he shares with us is his experiment in life in trying to seek fulfillment in these things in and of themselves. And in summary, what Solomon says is that if you look to the things of this earth as an end to themselves, you will find that is a monstrous exercise in vanity and futility. Only God, Solomon says, only an understanding and reverence for God, living a life of trust in fear of the Lord, can keep life from being vanity of vanities. Solomon gives this wonderful conclusion. Look at chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verse 13. this marvelous conclusion, though you see evidence of it throughout. This is what he says in chapter 12, verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is the whole of man. For God will bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it is good or whether it is evil. And I really like the way this other version presents verses 13 and 14. Here's the way they put it. Well, all has been heard and life is quickly passing. Here then is the conclusion of life's purpose. Stand in awe of God. Continue to obey his commandments. For this is life's purpose. It is everything for man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including the secret things, good or evil. We must give an account unto God, our Creator. People sometimes say, give me the bottom line. Cut to the chase. Well, Solomon gives you the bottom line. All human experience will end in judgment. God has a solution for this crazy mixed up world. It's called judgment. All wrongs will be righted. All injustices made right. Every crooked thing will be made straight. That is the message of Ecclesiastes. Since all lives and all roads ultimately lead to judgment, there is only one way to make this life worth living, and that is living a life of trust in God, our Creator, in fear of him. Well, let's turn our attention now to chapter 1. Let's go to the opposite side of the book here, and let's unfold how the writer, Solomon, came to this conclusion. Chapter 1, verse 1. The words of the preacher, and the word Ecclesiastes means the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Man, there's a real pick-me-up. How about that for the beginning of a book? But I want you to understand, brother and sister, that Solomon is not pronouncing his verdict here on life in general. This is his assessment of life on the part of any person who looks to the things of this life in the wrong way, who begins to see various things of this earth, life on the horizon, as an end to itself, that somehow money, somehow recreation, fun, somehow the things of this world can give you some kind of lasting purpose, lasting joy, lasting happiness. It can't do that. It's not capable of doing that. It wasn't created for that purpose. Life under the sun and the things of this world cannot fully satisfy the human spirit. Only spiritual things can satisfy the human spirit. Verses 3 through 10, Solomon calls us to witness the endless cycle of life. And he does this in contrast to the fleeting nature of our own lives. Beginning at verse 3, he says, "What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also the sun rises and the sun sets. Hastening to its place, it rises there again. Blowing toward the south and turning toward the north, the wind continues swirling along, and on its circular courses, the wind returns. All the rivers flow into the sea, and yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, there again they flow. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. That which has been done is that which will be, that which has been done is that which will be done. And so there is nothing new under the sun. And so in contrast here with the earth, with the sun, the wind, and the rivers, and various things that we see on this earth, which are seemingly constant, Solomon views human life as fleeting. It's generations coming and going. We're just another generation. It's our turn now to make our own footprint in the sands of time. Verse 4, a generation goes, a generation comes, the earth remains forever. The sun we arose by this morning is the same sun Adam and Eve arose by thousands of years ago. The same moon by which we pillow our heads at night is the same moon Adam and Eve pillowed their heads at night millennia ago. The word vanity that's used here is used 37 times, and its most basic meaning is breath or vapor. And so you can definitely understand from that how he's getting the idea of fleeting. Life is fleeting. Life is transient. But it also carries the idea of emptiness, trying to catch the wind. There's an emptiness. If we view something as an end to itself, it will disappoint us eventually. We're trying to get something out of it it cannot deliver. And Solomon says in the end, it will be futile. You will find it's an exercise in vanity. It can't give you what you're seeking from it. At best, the things of this earth, good, decent, wholesome things that we may get involved in, can provide a very short, temporary pleasure, a short, temporary joy. We can get that from it. And Solomon's all for that. He's not against that. Again, when he says vanity of vanities, that's not his verdict on life in general. That's his verdict on any misguided idea that somehow you can get from these things more than what you're seeking. They cannot deliver that. And they were not created to do that. We're spiritual beings housed in a body. And you cannot satisfy the human spirit with things. It's not possible. Very temporarily, you can have a joy, but then that passes and you start looking for something else or more of the same. So since our lives are fleeting, Ecclesiastes teaches there's only one wise response to this life and its many dilemmas, and that is to live our lives in reverence for God and keep all earthly things in perspective of his eternal purpose. And that's what is meant by living a life of trust in fear of God. It's a balanced life in the fear of God. When we keep all earthly things and all endeavors of life in perspective of God's purpose, then and only then, life under the sun can have a lasting peace, a lasting joy, and a lasting purpose. Living life under the sun can bring joy, and there can be a hope and a constant sense of abiding peace, which Christians should have because of Jesus Christ paying the price of our debt that we couldn't pay. And I want us to see that Solomon doesn't just dangle that hope at the very end of the book. He didn't say, oh, and by the way, there's going to be a judgment, and there is hope. There's a hope and a peace that he talks about and a joy that you can have every day as a servant of God, living a balanced life of trust and the fear of God. If we keep things in proper perspective of God's purpose revealed in his word. If we step out of that purpose, then as an old American proverb says, you're trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear and it cannot produce. We're trying to squeeze blood from a turnip and it won't give you what you're looking for. But as you go through the book, there's an overriding principle of joy and hope that's, I think, often missed. And a lot of times people see this as a very negative book. And it's not, if we understand that Solomon's purpose is only to go into that area if you have a misguided view of things of this world. Look with me at a few examples. Look at chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. We're going to go through several chapters in the book to make this point that we can have a life of joy and a life of eternal purpose, a life of peace, if we just keep all these things in perspective of God's word. Chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. Then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. And all that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold from my heart any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor. This was my reward for all my labor. In chapter 2, verse 24, there is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good. This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without God? That's a critical statement. Who can eat, who can have enjoyment without God? In chapter 3 and verse 12, I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it. There's nothing to take from it. For God has so worked that men should fear him. In chapter 4, verse 9 through 12, a very encouraging, well-known set of verses here. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there's not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. How can one keep warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. The wisdom, the joy of having that dear companion or dear friend, trusted friend. Chapter 5, verse 12. The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. Chapter 5, verse 18. Here's what I have seen to be good and fitting, to eat and drink and enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given to him. This is his reward. Verse 19, furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. That is the gift of God. In chapter 9, verse 9, chapter 9 of Ecclesiastes and verse 9. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life. Same word as in chapter 1 and verse 2. All is vanity, vanity of vanities, fleeting. Here, clearly the idea of fleeting, transient. All the idea of your fleeting life, which is given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life and in your toil in which you have labored under the sun. And so when Solomon says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, that has to be kept in context of Solomon's overriding purpose. God makes nothing vain. Only people make it vain. Things only become vain when we view them apart from God's purpose. And then when we do that, then the result of all of that is going to be an emptiness. It will leave us feeling empty. And so to prove his point, then Solomon invites us into the laboratory of his life. He is king of Israel. He's very wealthy. He's very powerful. He's very wise. At that time, he's the wisest man on earth. And so if anyone has the ability to stretch to the very limit the capability of something under the sun to provide lasting purpose, lasting joy, lasting peace, well, it would be Solomon. And what Solomon is saying to us in this book is, let me save you a lot of trouble. You know, experience is a good teacher. It can be a hard teacher, but it's a good teacher, wise to learn from our own experiences. Far wiser, Solomon would say, in Proverbs as well as Ecclesiastes, to learn from the experiences of others. And so Solomon is saying, I've tried it. I've tested its ability. Listen to what I have to say about the four great fleeces of earthly dreams. And I can tell you, when you look to these things as an end to themselves, you will be sorely disappointed. He tried it, and he said, that's the way I felt about it. The first thing that Solomon experiments with is knowledge. Look at chapter 1, verse 16. He looks to knowledge and wisdom. And again, God made him the wisest man on earth at that time. His conclusion concerning knowledge and wisdom, chapter 1, verse 16. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who are over Jerusalem before me. And my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. This is one reason I believe it is Solomon as the writer. I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I realized that this too is striving after wind. Because in much wisdom, there is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. That's what Solomon had to say about knowledge and wisdom. Secondly, Solomon turns his attention to fun and recreation, something our nation is obsessed with. They've practically made a god out of it. In chapter 2, verse 1, Solomon says this, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure, and so enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was vanity. Now, Solomon goes on to say in chapter 2, he went all out in this endeavor. In verse 4, he says, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself. I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate the forest of growing trees. Verse 8, also I collected for myself silver and gold, the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers, the pleasures of men, many concubines, or as one little boy read it, many cucumber vines. So what is his conclusion after all of that? In chapter 2, verse 11, thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun. That is, if we look to them as an end to themselves. In chapter 5, beginning about verse 10 there, Solomon tests the ability of money and material things to provide lasting joy, lasting purpose. Chapter 5, verse 10, he says this, he who loves money, and Solomon had a lot of it, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money. He who loves abundance will not be satisfied with its income. This too is vanity. Verse 11, when good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what is the advantage to their owners except to look on? And so he tests the great fleeces of earthly dreams and providing lasting joy and purpose and happiness. And he said he was sorely disappointed. Living a life of trust in the fear of the Lord means, brother and sister, we're under no illusions concerning money and material things. It's necessary for living, but it does not and it cannot make a life. Living a life of trust in the fear of God means that we're under no illusions concerning knowledge and whatever skill set we may pursue in this life. Solomon said, increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. No matter how much we learn in a certain area of life, we realize no matter what the learning or the skill may be, we're only learned in a few areas of this life. And there's always more to learn in those areas. And Solomon would say, there's only 10,000 other areas in which you can be learned in. As one person put it so well, he said, you know, the more I know the less. Solomon said, the more I learn, there's an increasing pain. And maybe, perhaps what he's talking about there, I suggest to you, is the more you learn, the more you understand, the more we begin to see that there are many things in this world that are broken, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. Maybe provide some degree of comfort, some help, but I can't fix it. And that indeed is disappointing. That's frustrating. Living a life of trust in the fear of God means that we're under no illusions concerning hobbies, fun, and recreation. Solomon would say, as we read in chapter 2, eat, drink, and be what? Solomon's not against rest. He's not against recreation, having fun, any more than he's against knowledge, wisdom, and the pursuit of excellence. But Solomon is against any misguided thinking that somehow fun and recreation can provide us a lasting sense of fulfillment. It can't. Temporary at best. As doing this lesson, the words of an old hymn came to mind. Only in thee. And the first verse of that song says, pleasures of earth, so seemingly sweet, fail at the last my longings to meet. Only in thee my bliss is complete. Only, dear Lord, in thee. God's word is the standard and the point of reference by which all things of this earth must be interpreted and measured as good or bad, useful or unuseful. Any view of life that does not rise above our earthly surroundings, Solomon would say, is vanity and striving after wind. Well, is that all there is? We thank God it's not all there is, because Paul says there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Struggle as we may with the problem of sin, Romans 7, Paul says in Jesus Christ, there's now no condemnation for those who are in him. For the law of the Spirit of life, the gospel, has set you free from the law of sin and death. And so in the coming of Jesus Christ, all was made complete. And there can be an eternal purpose, eternal hope, eternal joy, and eternal peace, even while we live on this earth, because we understand, as we've just sung, this world is not my home. I'm just passing through. Because life is fleeting, and so is everything in this life. You know, the closing remarks in the Bible about Solomon are not good. 1 Kings 11 says this about Solomon. It came about when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods. And his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. We can only hope that Ecclesiastes is Solomon's swan song, that in his many efforts to try this and try that and prove this and prove that, then in the end he figured it out, that they can't provide the peace, the joy, the purpose I need. Only God can do that. Only God, as he says, can keep life from being the vanity of vanities and futility of futilities. Eventually, as Solomon points out, fear God and keep his commandments. That's the only thing that will matter. Brother and sister, nothing else will matter in your daily life except, did you fear God and did you keep his commandments? Let's figure that out now and not wait too late. You sow an act. Sometimes eventually you reap a habit with that. Sow your habit, you reap a character. And sow your character, and you reap eternity. Let's sow a character that's according to the perspective of Solomon in Ecclesiastes. Enjoy life as God intended. Let there be a peaceful life there. And there can be pleasure and enjoyment of things of this earth, the food and the bounty of it, but only in perspective of his word, that it's a very temporary, short-lived pleasure and just a means to a far greater end, and that is heaven someday. So where does your road lead? All roads lead somewhere, Solomon would say. All roads lead somewhere, and eventually they will end up before the throne of God in judgment. Are you ready for that day? If not, why not get ready? Can we assist you in coming to the Lord? If not right now at this moment in time and singing this song of encouragement, maybe after services, can we encourage you further? We'd love to do that. We'd love the opportunity to do that. If right now, will you come please and let it be known as we stand and sing this song?